All right, welcome to the 2020 AGM for CASDA. We are so glad you could join us. My name is Debbie Irish and I am the chair of the board of directors for CASDA. Before we get started, I will run through a few technical considerations. Please begin by typing your full name and organization in the chat function so that we can accurately include you in our AGM minutes. We will be using a Mentimeter for voting purposes. If you have not done so, please open www.menti.com on your mobile device or in another browser tab on your desktop. Type in the code 20011666 to access today's motions. You'll see that there is that link in the chat as well as the code. If you experience any technical issues, you can email Megan at mkras@casda.ca or call her at 438-990-7199. The AGM should last a little bit less than 30 minutes. We have several people joining us today on this webinar, so we have muted participant lines to reduce the noise distractions. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. As we gather for the CASDA AGM, physically dispersed and virtually connected, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet from our various locations across the country, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been Aboriginal peoples who have been stewards of this place. I am currently located in Wasaga Beach in Ontario and acknowledge that I am an uninvited guest on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Haudenosaunee, Aborigine, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Anishinaabeg people. I recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place and recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular and our province and country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. Our quorum is 10 organization members. I can report that we have more than 10 organization members present, therefore quorum is met. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded. It is my pleasure to call our AGM to order. You will see we will be using poll questions for voting purposes. When there is an opportunity to vote for a motion, you will be asked to vote in favor, opposed, or abstain. Please select the option you prefer. All members who are in good standing 45 days in advance of our AGM are eligible to vote and received an AGM package, the agenda, minutes from last year, and audited financial statements by email. Please note that there will only be one vote per organization. Slide 4. On the screen, you will see our proposed agenda. May I call for a motion to approve the agenda?
I move.
Thank you, Kim. A seconder?
I can second, Cynthia Carroll.
Thank you, Cynthia. All members, please vote. Chrissy, if you can tell me if the motion has passed.
The motion is passed.
Thank you. Approval of the AGM minutes. The 2019 AGM minutes were sent to all members by email in advance of this meeting. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections? Please add them in the chat now. The 2019. Sorry, there's a typo in the motion. The motion should read the review and approval of minutes for the AGM on April 13th, 2021. The materials are the 2019 AGM minutes. So we're reviewing last year's AGM minutes. Can I ask for a motion to approve the 2019 AGM minutes?
I move.
Thank you, Kim. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second. Cynthia Carroll.
Thank you, Cynthia. All members, please vote. And Chrissy, could you just let me know the vote?
Yep, the motion is passed.
Thank you. Slide 6, Jonathan. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone as we celebrate all that was accomplished in 2020. We entered the year very excited about the election outcome, specifically the commitment to a national autism strategy in 2 ministers' mandate letters. We knew we had a great deal of work ahead of us. What we did not anticipate was the curveball that COVID-19 brought to our doors. As we were making plans for meetings with members of Parliament and senators to continue advocating the advocacy work around a national autism strategy and planning in the final stages for our leadership summit, the country was beginning to face the reality of stay-at-home orders. Pivoting to doing all business in a virtual format proved to be both a challenge, but also an incredible learning opportunity. Instead of the Autism Leadership Summit in April, CASDA hosted a series of webinars as we were required to reschedule the Leadership Summit to the fall. We were very hopeful at that point that we could still go ahead with in person, but unfortunately did not prove to be the case. The announcement by the Public Health Agency of Canada that the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences would lead consultations for the development of a national autism strategy provoked our board to reflect upon and reaffirm its strategic directions. This provided John and his team with a direction to focus on a wider range of activities that support a national autism strategy in the long run. And wow, did they deliver. As you will hear from John, CASDA's footprint is much larger and diverse, leading to significant impact that has been realized through increased partnerships, increased funding, and greater participation in initiatives of national scope. Without further ado, I will turn over to our Executive Director, Jonathan Lai, to take us through CASDA's year in review.
Great, let me just open my slide deck. As we're so accustomed to these days, it takes a few seconds. Share screen. There we are. So yeah, I want to give an update, and for some of our new members, a few slides first about who we are. You found this link on your here because you purposefully, I think, got here. So, but just to give a background about who CASDA is today. So our vision at CASDA is really about a better quality of life for autistic Canadians. And as a constructive policy generator, CASDA aims to identify emerging policy gaps and create systems change by guiding the development and implementation of a national autism strategy. A successful national autism strategy will accomplish this vision as a means to align policy, programs, and services with the vision that we have. So before I get into what's ahead, we want to talk about where we came from. It's really important to understand the legacy and the work that CASDA has done for us to know where we're going. So a year in review. I'll take the next 10 minutes or so to walk through some of the highlights, obviously not doing justice to many of the projects and a lot of the work of staff and partners and members who are on this call that have created this incredible piece of work. So our strategic plan had 3 pillars. First, collective voice, bringing people, organizations, and ideas together. Secondly, federal advocacy, engaging at the federal level with policymakers on issues that impact autistic individuals. And thirdly, operational excellence, making sure we have a resource management system that supports our mission and building that up. So I'm going to start off with some federal advocacy pieces. So everybody here is probably familiar with the blueprint, which was released in 2019 before the election. We looked at these as areas of federal jurisdiction, which we can bring to the government, the federal government, to action a national autism strategy. We followed that up last year, last March, with the roadmap to a national strategy. This was published the week before COVID came to Canada. So some of these deadlines are a little shifted, but it still provides a robust, strong roadmap that will inform how we continue to move forward and what you can expect with some of the timelines on the top row shifted a bit. And these documents are all available on our website. And from there, we worked with Kids Brain Health Network to do some research, do some policy scoping analyses of international perspectives about autism strategy and disability strategies, what that looked like around the world, to have some comparative policies. And coming to today, through this partnership, we had developed a policy compendium. And these compendium themes align with the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences work on the consultation for the national strategy. And today we've created this compendium tool on our website to make conversations around policy more accessible and more user-friendly. So for each of these themes, we have links to the various policy briefs that were developed by the policy fellows last year, summarizing recommendations that stakeholders from across the country, many of you who are involved in these groups, into bite-sized social media posts, into policy briefs, into sort of highlights and key summaries that will help us engage with the community and with government partners. Next, collective voice. So as Debbie already mentioned, we started off with some webinars as we had to quickly pivot to an online format. These webinars are really to inform, to advocate, and more importantly, to equip and empower others to do so. So here's just some of the snapshots of some of the ones we did during the year at the United Nations Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities, with the Disability and Work Conference, usually held in Ottawa, with Ryerson University, with Canada's Children's Healthcare Canada, a podcast, at the Kids Brain Health Virtual Conference, with the United Nations Department once again. And we also held the Leadership Summit, which we had 260 participants come across Canada and internationally, actually, that participated in the summit last year. And this is just a program from the summit last year, and I'll talk about this year and what we're planning. And last, we also launched a podcast series in partnership with Spiro's Careers Canada. Right now, we're averaging about 2 episodes per month, and there's 7 episodes to date. And we're planning to continue with a lot of interest to highlight the work of CASDA and also those who work with us. In operational excellence, so I'm going to walk through some of the projects that we have done at CASDA ourselves. So first, in partnership with Ready, Willing, and Able, looking at autism and employment, we have an autism employment policy scan looking at the different policies around getting employment and sustaining employment supports across the country in each of the regions, provinces, and territories. There was an employment recovery program that was put in place after COVID-19 hit, which led into the Inclusive Workplace, which we just launched as a hub of resources for employers, for community organizations, and for employees. And also the Autistic Voices Project to gather the stories of autistic job seekers or ones who are in jobs and how COVID has affected them. So on the policy scan, there will be the deliverables this coming year, a report for all CASDA members, and also a resource for these 3 groups, which I just mentioned earlier. We also last year had the pan-cancer, a pandemic survey about needs during COVID. We put this out, mobilized it with Autism Speaks Canada and McArt immediately following the COVID outbreak, even before CERB was put together. So we're very proud of this work that we've done with our members. We had over 800 participants that took part in this, and over a quarter of them were autistic Canadians themselves. And the survey and the infographic and the brief can be found on the website and on Autism Speaks Canada's website as well. Not lastly, there's a few more to go, but with the Azrieli Foundation, they have funded a new work we are doing to create have a building block for an autism data network. And this is to create a foundation for comprehensive integrated data network in Canada. In collaboration with our partners, we're not doing this ourselves, but we are here to be the hub and build that network, making sure we're all coordinated and looking at data the same way in regards to autism across the country, both at the administrative data level and at the clinical level. And I'm proud to say that we have Dr. Deepa Singhal joining us to do this work. She's a professor based at the University of Manitoba. The project objectives in a little bit of detail, and we're going to hear a little more from our guest speaker on this, but to bring together data scientists, stakeholders of different sorts from across the country, set the foundation for that data network, and support the PARC research program, which you'll hear about in a little bit. We also had an autism research framework program project, which was to bring stakeholders together to have an actionable vision for how autism research could be conducted in Canada. In Canada, we do have an excellent amount of autism research that's known internationally. We should be proud of that, but there are always ways to improve. And we've started to identify some of these barriers, identify some of these gaps, and see how we can improve our system further. And here is the Canadian Journal of Autism Equity. Many of you have heard of it. We were very busy last week to do this. We're proud to say we have almost a dozen now, but autistic editors who are leading this. And this journal is launched. It's going to be published twice a year. Our first issue was in April, so just last week, and then next one in October coming up. Here's this first issue. And the goal of this, or what this is, it's an open access community journal to focus critically on engaging a variety of equity discussions in the autism community and in public policy. Yeah, and as mentioned, this first journal featured works from the editorial board. So I invite you to take a read on our website or at cj.ca, I believe, or .com. Megan can put it in the chat to correct me. And looking forward, so that's a really quick whirlwind of what we've been doing this past year. It seems like yesterday, when all this started, and look how much we've accomplished. Looking forward, I'm gonna kind of fly through some of the projects going forward. Again, not doing justice to a lot of them, but two principles that we're going to be thinking about and looking forward in this next year. As we become a convener, as we become the place where collective impact, mobilizing collective impact, two principles. So the first one here is equity seeking. As we know in history, as we know in society, when initiatives like this have a bit of, are mobilized and have a bit of momentum, it's important to, I'd call it swim upstream to make sure that we have an equity seeking emphases in all our projects and how we choose to do our work. And secondly, to make sure we're data driven. So similarly, we want to make sure that, in today's world with the onset of social media, with the onset of different sources of news, to make sure that we are focused on the data, that reality isn't misconstrued and policies and practices aren't informed by things that aren't true. So these two principles will really drive how CASDA will move forward. So equity seeking and data driven. So here's some of the projects. So Autism Data Network, so that has just started. Deepa has just joined us, so we will be launching that. It's a 2-year project there. The CASDA KBHN Policy Fellowship, so last year was a success with the 5 working groups we did with Kids Brain Health Network. We have 7 fellows joining us this year, and we will be holding, they will be doing some continued work on developing policy with stakeholders from across the country on autism policy. We will be doing some accessibility work, a visual work from home guide for autistic Canadians and employers and other stakeholders. And, because virtual work is with us to stay, what are the barriers in doing so? And we have a collaboration with Microsoft that's continuing to grow for that. Autistic Voices 2. So we had Autistic Voices 1, which was just to remind you to hear the stories of autistic Canadians after COVID, what's gone on in terms of their employment. We realized, bring this equity seeking idea along, that a lot of underrepresented populations of Canada weren't part of those stories. So we're going to actively look and try to raise their narratives and their stories as well. Summit 2021 is going to occur. We're live and well with our Summit Committee and moving forward. October 6th and 7th of this year is the dates, so pin that to your calendar. We will be virtual. Maybe we're planning to host some watch parties for local community gatherings or local gatherings as public health guidelines allow us, but we will have a virtual platform that will be the backbone of it all. And lastly, this year, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is having their civil society report due. So we will be part of that process, working with many of the other disability organizations. We are partly in leadership of a Pan-Disability Leadership Coalition that we're trying to form with the minister and work with these other organizations. So those were some of the highlights. You can look forward to this summer. We're going to start some community roundtables. This is related to the work with kids' brain health, where we will do some stakeholder mapping to build on the policy compendium that was made last year. And we're looking for your involvement, your expertise in doing so. And this is just to test your eyes, really. But my point of putting the slide in, it's our org chart. Last year, there were 2 dots on here, really, if we even had one. Now, just to reflect that CASDA, we are growing in terms of us being the backbone of all that you are doing and drawing people in and coordinating. So we are a growing organization, and I'm proud to say and thankful for the many staff and volunteers that have been along in this process. And we're looking forward to further work. So in the development of autism-related policies and processes, what are we now? We are really the convener. We want to be that place where the autism community comes together. We are the incubator of these innovative ideas, including the Autism Data Network. And how do we do this? We do so by working together to foster consensus, to pilot innovation and bring together emerging practices from you, our members, to the federal government. So that is our role. That's how we're going to position ourselves in this coming year as we move alongside with the Canadian Academy's consultation process to make sure it's robust, to make sure that as the National Autism Strategy is being put to work, that it is something that will last and have impact on the ground to affect the lives of the people we care for. So that's everything from me. I see there were some things in the chat I couldn't follow along as I was presenting, but I guess I can take some questions if there's a little bit of time for that. Yep, it was cj.ca, not .com. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Debbie then.
Thank you, John. And despite COVID, it sounds like it was, or I know it was a very, very active year for you and the team. And we at the board cannot thank you enough for the work that you did, despite all of the challenges that we all felt with openings and closings and uncertainty and everything else. Thank you. I would like to now ask Kim Ward, Chair of the Nominations Committee, to present the report from that committee.
Thanks, Debbie. The members of the Nominations Committee have worked hard throughout the year to present you with candidates who will continue to provide diversity, experience, and a wide range of skills to the CASDA Board of Directors and the various committees. The Nominations Committee follows the procedures outlined in CASDA's bylaws, and our bylaws allow us to have a total of 15 board members. We currently have 4 board members who will be returning. That's Rebecca Kitzinger, Tanya McLeod, myself, and Jill Farber. We currently have 5 board members who have completed their terms and are not standing for re-election. The following directors will not be standing for re-election: Cynthia Carroll, Marg Whelan, Brooke Pinsky, Natalie Garson, and Denise McKee. This year, there are 4 returning directors whose terms have ended and who have been nominated to stand for re-election. These directors are Adrian Bohach, Heather Driscoll, Susan Vanderveld Koch, and Debbie Irish. The nomination committee is recommending that the slate of returning nominees be approved for a 1-year term without a formal ballot. The nominations committee, and finally, the nominations committee is bringing forward a slate of 6 new nominees for approval, all for a 2-year term to serve on CASDA's board of directors. The bios for each candidate were shared with the meeting package. The 6 candidates are Karen Bopp, Maddie Deaver, Brian Foster, Shino Nakani, Corey Walker, and Arshad Zaver. Each of the candidates has indicated their commitment to CASDA's purpose and objectives. And through discussions and interviews with the candidates, it was evident that they all share a deep commitment to CASDA's mission and bring a real wealth of experience and tremendous skills to the board. Can I have a motion to approve the slate of new nominees to terms of 2 years on the CASDA board of directors?
Yes, I motion to approve.
And I second. It's Debbie. All members, please vote.
And I think we've got a bit of an issue with the Mentimeter because the next motion, it appears we're voting on the financial statements, but it should be a vote to approve the slate of nominees.
So do you want us then to say yes to this one?
Yes,
Or-
it was a typo. It was a carried over slide. So if you can please approve the motion or abstain or oppose.
The motion is passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. We have completed our financial year ending on December 31st, 2020, and members received the audit by email in advance of this meeting. I would like to introduce Arshad Zaver to present some highlights from CASDA's 2020 audit.
Thank you, Debbie. Hi, everyone. My name is Arshad, and I'll be presenting the 2020 audited financial statements for the year end as of December 31st, 2020. So just to highlight, our audit went very smooth and our auditors didn't present any significant issues. You should have all received a copy of the audited financial statements from the link embedded on the meeting agenda. I'd like to draw your attention to page 3 of the statements, which is the independent auditor's report. And it outlines the auditor's opinion, the basis for giving that opinion, the responsibilities of management and governance, and finally the auditor's responsibilities. So the most significant part of the report is the opinion issued by the auditors, and there's 4 different tiers of audit opinions, the cleanest of which is an unqualified audit opinion, followed by a qualified audit opinion, which most not-for-profit organizations receive, which is then followed by a disclaimer of opinion, and then finally an adverse opinion. So the last 2 opinions are not seen as favorable amongst public accountants. So I'm very proud to announce that we've been upgraded to the cleanest of all audit opinions, which is the unqualified audit opinion. So moving on to the financial statements, I'd like to draw your attention to page 6, which is our statement of operations and net assets. So it's important that we have strong financial results to carry forward the mission and vision of CASDA. So I'm proud to report that we finished off the year very strong with a surplus of $46,000 seen on page 6, compared to a deficit of roughly $30,000 the year before. From an operational standpoint, the pandemic played a large role on our strong performance due to the fact that the conference was made virtual and large costs such as the venue and food were eliminated. The surplus will enable us to plan for a better conference this year, allowing us to utilize and leverage technology and other infrastructure related costs. When looking at total revenues, we finished off with $357,000 compared to $177,000 last year, which was a positive change of 101%. This was driven by new grants we received, such as the Can Do, project and the 4 grants we received from Ready, Willing, and Able, 3 of which are totally new. So we're going back to page 5, our statement of financial position, which is commonly referred to as our balance sheet, outlines that our asset base stood at 239,644 compared to 174,460 the year before, which is an increase of 37%. Our assets are funded by our cumulative surpluses at a rate of 52%. This strong balance sheet will enable us to carry forward the various projects that CASDA is looking to carry forward into 2021. As he pointed out in his year in review, John and his team have already identified new funding opportunities and have secured some new grants for this new fiscal year. They will continue to seek opportunities as the year progresses. The audited financial statements will be posted on our website once they've been approved at this AGM and the auditors provide us with the final drafts. Should you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me by email. So now may I have a motion to approve CASDA's 2020 audited financial statements on Menti?
I move. It's Debbie.
Great, thank you. A seconder?
I'm happy to second it, Cynthia Carroll.
Thank you, Cynthia. All members, please vote.
The motion is passed.
Thank you, Chrissy. So moving on, CASDA would like to reappoint Levy, Casey, Carter, McLean, Chartered Professional Accountants as our audit firm for 2021. So motion 5, may I have a motion to approve Levy, Casey, Carter, McLean, Chartered Professional Accountants as the auditor for CASDA for fiscal year 2021?
Yes, motion to approve.
Thank you. A seconder?
I can second the motion, Borpinski.
Thank you. All members, please vote.
The motion is passed.
Thank you, Chrissy. Are there any questions about the audit before we move on?
Hearing none, thank you, Arshad. I would like to again call upon Kim Ward to review changes to CASDA's bylaws.
The landscape has changed significantly for not-for-profit corporations since CASDA was incorporated. So although we revised our bylaws last year, we felt that additional changes were required to reflect CASDA's evolution, to reflect the feedback we received from members, and really to position us for the future. With respect to the changes, the first recommended change is that the language throughout the document, throughout the bylaws document, be revised to be non-binary from a gender perspective. The second proposed change relates to membership categories, specifically CASDA's desire to be more inclusive and welcome more voices. As such, we are proposing 3 membership categories: organization, community, and associate. Organization members would include incorporated charities or nonprofit organizations, and they would be paid and voting members. Community members would include individuals as well as non-incorporated or incorporated organizations or groups that do not qualify as organization members. I guess the big change here is that community members would also be paid and voting members of CASDA. Finally, we're proposing to add a 3rd class of associate members. These would be non-voting free memberships that would be open to anyone who elects to subscribe to CASDA's newsletter or to attend CASDA's events. And then the 3rd and final change is we wanted to specify that at all member meetings, such as this one, a quorum of 10 voting members would be required rather than previously the 10 organizational members. Are there any questions regarding the bylaws? May I have a motion to approve CASDA's revised bylaws as were circulated?
I approve.
Seconded.
Members, please vote.
The motion is passed.
Thank you. It is with sorrow that I thank our outgoing board members. I'm going to start with Cynthia. Cynthia joined the board in 2014, and during her time with CASDA is credited with leading some of its most significant work, including the National Needs Assessment, the partnership with Inclusion Canada to implement and deliver Ready, Willing, and Able, and the Canadian Autism Partnership Project. Cynthia's natural ability to develop relationships and partnerships moved CASDA forward as a credible organization to turn to for advice, conversations, and a strategic approach to advocacy. CASDA will be indebted to Cynthia for her leadership during the last 7 years. Currently working on her MBA, leading Autism Nova Scotia, and continuing to ensure that the Atlantic provinces are well represented and recognized for the incredible work they are doing will keep Cynthia busy. But with finishing her term with CASDA, there is a little window of time that I look forward to seeing how Cynthia fills it. I know that everything Cynthia gets involved in will succeed. All the best, Cynthia, and thank you for your incredible contribution. Marg Whalen, when the call went out amongst colleagues to do something about the Pay Now or Pay Later Senate report, Marg brought her incredible leadership skills to the challenge. With a small group of founders, CASDA was born. Working tirelessly, they started advocating for action within the federal government. Relationship building for anyone who knows Marg is a real strength. Marg developed strong ties within FAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, with Senator Munson and MP Judy Scrow and many, many others. These relationships have been long-lasting and productive for CASDA. In 2014, big things started to happen in CASDA with the FAC-funded National Needs Assessment, action on a National Autism Chair, and the beginnings of a framework for national surveillance. Marg was behind all of these things, keeping conversations going, knocking on the right doors, and bringing the right people to those conversations. Recognizing the amount of work that needed to be done, Marg started looking around for others to bring onto the board. Marg's ability to spot talent, nurture it, and promote it is second to none. At that point, Cynthia Jill and I joined the board. Marg never shied away from the work that needed to be done. As the lead CASDA member working with Dr. Jonathan Weiss on the National Needs Assessment, a project that proved to be way more than we bargained on, working in tandem with Cynthia on the Canadian Autism Partnership Project, a project that tested stamina, leadership, friendship, and political acumen. As a grant writer, strategist, student supervisor, mentor, and communications team member, Marg gave it her all. But above all, Marg has been a friend, a mentor, and a staunch supporter for many of us on the board and in the autism community at large. As Marg retires from the CASDA board and we lose our last founding member, we hope that we can live up to the incredible example that was set for us. I hope that Marg continues to share her enthusiasm, guidance, and nothing is worth doing halfway attitude with us by staying involved in some way with CASDA. Marg is a mentor and a friend. Marg, as a mentor and a friend, you have taught me what it means to be a leader, to raise others up, and to give it 100%. Thank you. Natalie Garson has been on the CASDA board for the last 6 years. As a board member from Quebec and a practicing clinical psychologist, Natalie brought a unique perspective. Natalie was able to tell the board firsthand the trends she was seeing in clinical practice, the impact of provincial policies, and the latest in research and practice. Natalie served as the vice chair of CASDA for the last 2 years with me. And when I sought advice, I could always count on Natalie to offer a well thought out and informed perspective. Natalie's passion and enthusiasm for learning something new, for research and big data will be missed at the board table. We hope you stay involved and continue to be excited by the work that CASDA is doing. Brooke Pinsky. Brooke is a new board member, serving just 1 year, but leaving the board to make time for her growing family. In her time at CASDA, Brooke did not shy away from rolling up her sleeves and getting involved in CASDA's work. Brooke offered her support and insight as we formed the governance committee and took on the important work of nominating a slate of new board members. We will miss Brooke's perspective as a staff member of an advocacy organization and a family member. We wish you and your family all the very best with your new little one and hope that you will come back to CASDA when you are able to. Denise McKee. Denise stepped away from the board in the fall. Before leaving, Denise strongly encouraged the board to work hard to ensure marginalized voices are authentically listened to, and that in consultation, we follow the lead of those communities rather than lead them, and that we strive to educate ourselves on the differing experiences, realities, and challenges faced by autistic Canadians, their families, and their communities in remote areas and marginalized sectors within Canada. With these words, we strive to continue to be better as a board and as an alliance. Thank you, Denise, for reminding us that there is still much work to do. And that wraps up the official portion of our AGM. We will be officially adjourning the business meeting and moving on to Dr. Stelios Georgiadis' presentation. Thank you all for your attention. I call our 2020 AGM to a close. Thank you all.
Thank you, Debbie. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Stelios Georgiadis to conclude our annual general meeting with a presentation. Dr. Georgiadis is an associate professor in Mcmaster's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences. He is also the founder and co-director of the Mcmaster Autism Research Team. Last month, on March 11, Dr. Georgiadis was appointed the inaugural holder of the Mcmaster Children's Hospital Chair in Autism and Neurodevelopment. On behalf of CASDA and all of our members, we're very excited to collaborate closely with Dr. Georgiadis and his team with the common goal of improving outcomes for autistic Canadians and their families. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Georgiadis, who will now present on meaningful collaborations for collective impact in autism.
Thank you so much. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so how do I start this presentation? First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased that I'm not part of the official session of the AGM. I tend to do better when it's unofficial, when it's a bit more casual. But it was really good for me to be part of this first session to hear about the progress that CASDA has made over the years. I went through I don't know if you do that, when I'm on a Zoom and there's multiple screens, I go through all the screens to see who's on and who's not on, right? And then I adapt what I say depending on who's not on. But I went through the screens and I must say that I feel that I'm among friends. I know most of you. I stood with most of you on the Hill, especially when they didn't want us to be up on the Hill over the years. But it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with all of you. Cynthia, Mark, and Natalie, what can I say? You know, you've laid the foundation for everything that's happening right now and everything that will happen in the years to come for autistics in our beautiful country of Canada. So thank you for all of that. Thank you for your friendship and your mentorship over the years. I love how you all cause trouble in a good way, you know, to make things happen for autistic Canadians. So today I'm going to try and provide an overview of what my team and I, through collaborations with CASDA, members of CASDA and other research groups across the country are trying to accomplish. Hopefully I won't bore you with technical and research terms, but I changed my title from the one that was given on the agenda because this is what I think of when I think of my work with CASDA: meaningful collaborations for collective impact in autism. I'm going to start by providing an overview of the Mcmaster Autism Research Team, although I know that most of you are very familiar with this team. This is a slide. It's a collection of pictures. I'm a visual person. I often forget names, but when I see a picture, when I see a face, I remember. So these are the people that make me look good. These are the people at Mcmaster from across disciplines, across departments, across faculties and clinical and research groups that come together to advance autism care through meaningful research. And I know that you recognize and that you work with many of the people on this screen. These are the actual names. And as you see the names, you'll also see the expertise and affiliations of the McArt members. We have over 35 faculty members from across 10 different departments who are actively involved in autism research. And we're proud to say that McArt brings together several entities at Mcmaster, like the Orford Center, Can Child, the Children's Hospital, and the university to advance autism research as we move forward. Everything we do, as you know, is directly linked to community engagement. Many of you have attended some of these community engagement conferences that we've had in the past. Many of you spoke as guests at these events, but we value what the community needs, what the community thinks, what the community wants. And that's a trendy thing to say in the academic ivory tower, that you engage with community, but we try to do it in an authentic way and in a very honest way. And I have to say, we're not there yet. Every time we do something, we learn that there's a better way of doing things. So it's an ongoing learning process for us. McArt is organized in 4 thematic pillars. We are a research group, but we appreciate that research cannot have an impact in isolation. So research, training, the services and care that is offered at our local clinics and policymaking are the 4 interconnected themes at McArt. And we have people working on these different themes and different pillars, and we have people who are working across all pillars. So I thought I would give a few examples of some of the major research projects that we're working on, because I think that sets the stage for the larger vision of McArt. So the main theme underlying the research projects of the Mcmaster Autism Research Team is to understand the diversity that we see in both the needs and the strengths of autistics across the different contexts, whether that's the clinic, the home, the community, the school, or society more generally, but also across development. So we have projects that engage very young children right after diagnosis, and then we have projects that engage youth, and we're hoping to expand into the early adulthood developmental stage. So one of the main projects that we're working on is the Pathways study, Pathways in ASD study, and many of you are familiar with this. A group of us presented at the last National Summit of CASDA. This is a project that's led by Dr. Peter Zapmari, who is a mentor to many of us. And it charts the growth and development of over 400 individuals on the autism spectrum from the point of diagnosis into the school years and over to the adolescent years. So we chose to take an ecological approach, which means that we study the child within the context of the family, within the context of the school and the community, and we try to identify the predictors and the outcomes in these children across our country. One of the key themes that's coming out of this very large study is that different individuals on the autism spectrum follow different pathways over time. Now, this should be no surprise to anyone. We know that there's diversity in autism, but to actually generate the empirical data that demonstrates this diversity can be a powerful tool for advocacy, and it can certainly help shape both policies at the government level, but also programs at the clinical and community level. So through several scientific publications, Pathways researchers have shown the relationships between predictors like family income, family coping, developmental level, language skills, challenging behaviors, and parental stress with a series of outcomes, including symptoms, sleep, eating behaviors, mental health, education, and functioning. Now, one of the things that we haven't been able to do well with the pathway study, and that was due to the nature of the study, is to understand how services and interventions actually influence the relationship between predictors and outcomes. In a recent paper, for example, coming out of our study, we've demonstrated that children with autism, many of them exhibit a turning point as they transition to school around age 6. So for example, even if all children show a reduction in symptoms during the preschool years, so from the point of diagnosis up until school entry, many of them kind of slow down. So their improvement slows down as they enter into the school system. And this is just an empirical way of demonstrating that there's key transition periods in the life of autistics that we need to be paying more attention to. The idea of expecting these transition points and preparing our systems and our services to support in a targeted way autistics as they transition, for example, from preschool into the school system. Now, the big question that remains unanswered is how do services and interventions actually influence our trajectories and outcomes? And to try and answer this question, we have thought a lot about what's a good outcome in autism. And traditionally in autism, a good outcome or an optimal outcome was defined by researchers. It was defined by experts. And usually an optimal outcome would be, an IQ over a certain point or a symptom under a certain point. So this was the research definition of an optimal outcome. And as many of you agree, that's not always the healthiest way of defining what an optimal outcome is. So a good colleague of mine, Connie Kasari, and I wrote a viewpoint a couple of years ago in which we define optimal outcome in a way that captures the diversity in individuals from across the spectrum, not only those that have a higher IQ score, for example, or a lower symptom severity score. A definition that is based on within individual growth over time. So everybody has a different starting point. So it's very important that we define our optimal outcome using our starting point and our own individual growth over time. And perhaps most importantly, a definition that describes progress on a wide range of domains beyond IQ and symptom severity that is identified as meaningful by those living on the autism spectrum. So to try and answer the question about how children grow and develop over time and how services and interventions and systems impact those developmental trajectories, we have recently launched a large cohort study called the Pediatric Autism Research Cohort. And you'll see all the logos that go next to the PARC study logo. This is a study across 6 sites in Canada and beyond that is supported by CASDA, Autism Speaks, Autism Ontario, and the CNIF Foundation. And the idea is to understand the factors that influence development, including socioeconomic status, individual strengths, services and supports, the family experience, symptoms and behaviors, and resource availability. We are hoping to make this the largest autism cohort study in the world that is designed to directly bridge the research to practice gap. It is a partnership between researchers, clinicians, and families. The research protocol is actually embedded within clinical practice instead of having the research parallel to clinical practice. And we have a real-time feedback of research data back to the family to enhance communication between clinicians and families, to enhance clinical decision-making processes, and to understand the individual and contextual level factors that impact trajectories. To run this study, we have developed a customized autism electronic research platform that has proven to be very useful, especially during these online times of the pandemic. Our site, the Mcmaster site, is housed at the Mcmaster Children's Hospital at the Ron Joyce Children's Health Center, but there's several other sites, including CHIO in Ottawa, Queens, in Kingston, in Sudbury, Edmonton, and a site in Israel. Now, so we talked a little bit about research studies and clinical sites at the local level, but we know that there's an issue at the systems level. And Jonathan touched on this in his presentation a little bit. You know, systems, programs, and policies tend to be siloed and are often not aligned with the latest best evidence, this idea of becoming data-driven, as Jonathan said. So at McArt, we are working on building regional, provincial, and national learning health networks, and almost all of those are in partnership and collaboration with CASDA. And we also try to advocate and advise governments through different committees and different roles, both at the provincial and federal level, to improve the programs, policies, and strategies. One idea that's at the foundation of everything we do is this idea of a learning health system, regionally, provincially, and nationally. And you know, Deepa and Jonathan are the true experts on how a system can actually align science, informatics, incentives, and culture to improve innovation and the services offered to autistics and their families. We're also working with funding from the Azrieli Foundation on a stakeholder dialogue. Many of the people who participate in this dialogue are actually here on this call today. And it's this idea that we need to move towards a pan-Canadian learning system, not just for autism, but for all neurodevelopmental disorders. And I'm proud to say that autism and the work of CASDA serve as the prototype, as an example for what a learning system for all NDDs could look like at the national level. We now have a couple of products that are available online on the Mcmaster Health Forum website, an evidence brief and a dialogue, stakeholder dialogue summary, kind of describing what we've learned so far and next steps in the development of a pan-Canadian learning system for NDDs. A few weeks ago, John and I had an opportunity to do a podcast for Children's Healthcare Canada, where we described the basic principles of a learning system, not just in autism, but in child health more generally. And we've received very positive feedback about this podcast. And many people out there are beginning to learn more about how a learning system can actually impact and improve our services across the country. Now, this is one of my favorite pictures. I can't remember exactly when this was, 2 or 3 years ago, I think. You know the background. You've all seen the postcard, right? And that's us standing in the cold. It's a little bit cold. It's usually April or May that we go up the hill. But you'll see that there's people from McArt, but there's people from CASDA, there's people from other research entities from across the country. And that is my favorite picture because it shows how no single entity, no single researcher or research team, no single university, not even a single advocacy organization can achieve the vision that we want to achieve by themselves. It takes collaboration, it takes meaningful collaboration to have the collective impact that everyone at CASDA has been striving for over the past few years. And you see everyone is smiling. That's the other thing, right? When you know that you have people who come together, they fight the good fight, and they become friends, not just colleagues and partners, but also form these friendships that you talked about earlier. That's when you know that we're going to be successful. And not all years and not all steps in this journey have been pleasant over the past few years, but I think we're in the right direction towards a better Canada for autistic Canadians. The other point I want to make is that as a researcher, it is often easier just to stand back when things go wrong at a government level. Our funding kind of depends on governments, right? Our relationships with governments and ministries and politicians and policymakers kind of define our progress in some ways in academia. But we feel that it's very important when you see something that you think is wrong based on the evidence that you have as a scientist, it's important to speak up. It's important to advocate. And this is just an example of an op-ed that we wrote a few years ago when the provincial government tried to move away from a needs-based assessment and a needs-based program for autism services in Ontario. And, we like to believe that our advocacy and the use of scientific evidence actually contributed to a reversal of that government decision. And many good people are actually working very hard right now, including people on this call, to develop a truly needs-based program for autism in Ontario. A few months ago, Jonathan and Mira from the Azrieli Foundation also talked about the urgent need for a national strategy. And as you all know, that's something that the government has committed to, and the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences is working on now with experts and autistics from across our country. So this is kind of my last slide. What's the vision? What are we thinking of when we talk about meaningful collaborations for collective impact? So we want to continue to work collaboratively with researchers, clinicians, educators, trainees, autistics, families, advocates, and policymakers to acknowledge differences within the spectrum, but also differences within the different partnerships, to build on the lived experience, to look at the whole person and family, not just symptoms of functioning or IQ levels, to develop regional, provincial, and national standards and networks, to reduce disparities and inequities, and I love the phrase equity seeking that Jonathan proposed, and to develop, monitor, evaluate, and refine services and systems for autism and neurodevelopmental disorders. And again, equity seeking and data driven, the two phrases that Jonathan proposed, are at the heart of everything we do at McCart. And as I said earlier, to do this, there's a need for integrating training, research, services, clinical practice, and policy. This is a slide that I'm very proud of. I just put this together the other day. These are some of the projects that McArt and CASDA are actively collaborating on. And you've seen some of these projects: the Autism Data Network Project, the Autism Research Framework, the PANCANS, the Pandemic Canadian Autism Needs Assessment, the National Autism Strategy, the Pan-Canadian Learning Health Network for Ndds, and of course, the Pediatric Autism Research Cohort Study. These are the logos of our main partners and collaborators from across the country and the globe. For those who want to learn a bit more about our work, we have 3 websites: Mac Autism, ASD Pathways, and Offutt Center. Those are the Twitter handles, as they call them, in case you want to follow us. And I've chosen to end with this slide. I don't know how many of you have seen this BBC documentary from the UK about an 8-year-old boy with autism called Woody. And Woody has what they call Woodisms, right? He has these phrases, these ideas that they're now converting into art. And one of the Woodisms that is with me throughout the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, is this idea that I don't want to go back to normal. I don't want life to go back to normal. I want it to go back to better. Better for all autistic Canadians, which in my mind means better for all Canadians. And I'm going to end right there. I promise not to bore you with technical research stuff, but I have a feeling I did. But hopefully we can have an interactive conversation and answer some of your questions. Thank you.